Hey MMA fans, Caged Minds, your host Mike and Frankel, doing our predictions and preview for UFC on Fox 3. There's 12 fights on this card. Let's get right to doing the predictions. First one we're talking about, Mike, the Master of Disaster Massenzio, 13-6, taking on Carlos Vemola, who's 9-2. Mike Massenzio, solid wrestler, good submissions. 7 of his 13 victories come from the stoppage. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, always improving his striking. We've seen that a lot more in his last 3 fights. He probably has a striking and a cardiovascular and submission advantage, I believe, in this fight. Carlos Vemola is going to look to get takedowns, use brute force, use ground and pound. He wings big punches just to get in close, push you against the cage, and get takedowns. Vemola has moved down from heavyweight to light heavyweight, now at middleweight. I believe the lower the weight class you drop to, the more skill is needed. His techniques are just horrible with the hands, and I believe Massenzio will take advantage of that, dictate the pace, and also use technique in his wrestling and counteract Vemola's wrestling, keep the fight standing, and win a unanimous decision. So we're taking Mike Massenzio with the unanimous decision. Next fight we're talking about, Rolando Delrome, who's 7-1, taking on Nick the Ninja Love Denis, who is 11-2. Rolando Delrome was on The Ultimate Fighter, Team Bisping vs. Mayhem. He's a lengthy 135er who gets most of his victories from the submission. All of his victories are from stoppage, so he's not been the distance in a win. His one loss did go the distance. He lost a decision. He has good long limbs, great for grappling, and he uses a Muay Thai clinch, gets the knees in there. His strikes seem to be very clean, but not very powerful. Good technique, not much power behind it. Nick Denis, a lot of power behind his technique. He's violent. He ends fights with the TKO. 10 of 11 of his victories come from the TKO. I believe he's going to get inside, beat up the body, cut off the reach of disadvantage he has, which is only an inch, get inside, land some tight jabs, uppercuts actually, I meant, sorry, not jabs, and get a TKO stoppage in the second round. Denis hits harder, he's more of a veteran of the game, he's not going to be suckered into playing on the ground where Delrome can get the advantage. I think he keeps it standing and ends it with the strikes. We're going to take Nick Denis with a second round TKO. Third matchup we got, Pablo the Scarecrow Garza, who's 12-2, takes on Ultimate Fighter finalist Denis Bermudez, who's 8-3. Garza, 6'1", is huge at 135 pounds with his length, wins most of his fights from the submission. 7 of his 12 victories to be exact. We've seen him with a great flying knee and even the flying triangle that he beat Yves Jabouin with. He's going to look to use a 7-inch reach advantage, stay at the distance, and perhaps even if he gets taken down, he's very effective with the long limbs looking for submissions. Denis Bermudez is a wrestler who primarily boxes. Primarily boxing, he'll be looking to catch kicks, look for the takedowns. If Bermudez can get on top, he can ride out a 3-round decision. I believe that really the longer he stands on his feet, the more possible it will be for Garza to pick him apart or even hit him with one of those big knees. Bermudez, for being a wrestler, does lack in the submission defense. His last 3 fights, he's been submitted all 3 times. I think we could see a 4th straight. Garza, long limbs, I'd like him to get a triangle, and we're going to call a triangle in the first round where they'll still dry, that Bermudez will get hit with the strike, drop in for a takedown, and then Garza will work his guard, slipping in the triangle and getting the submission choke victory in the first round. Next fight we're talking about, Danny, last call, Castillo, who's 13-4, taking on John Cholish, who's 8-1. Castillo is a wrestler. He likes to get on top, work for position, control the fight, ground it out. He'll beat you up some. He's finished 9 of his 13 victories, some TKOs. Cholish is about the same mold. He's had 7 of his 8 victories by stoppage, 3 TKOs, and 4 submission. Cholish has a good jab, stays light on the balls of his feet, but I think that slightly over. Castillo has a takedown wrestling advantage as to where if he gets on top of Cholish, he's going to be able to ride him out and ground and pound him for the majority of the round. But Cholish has an advantage in the scrambles, and in the transitions, I think he's quicker and faster. The prediction in this fight is going to be a long 3-round war between the two gentlemen. I see Castillo winning this fight in a split decision. A couple more takedowns. I think he'll have a little longer time on top, but would not be surprised to see Cholish also could be very effective with his jab and then get his own top control. Top game will be ultra important with these two wrestlers, but we're taking Castillo to win a split decision. Next matchup, Luis Goodnight Gauinot, who's 5-2, is going to welcome John Hands of Stone Lanker, who's 19-5, to the UFC. Gauinot, we've seen in The Ultimate Fighter. He fought at 135. He gets to return to flyweight now. His natural weight class at 125. Both of these men like to strike. Lineker is making his flyweight debut. So right there, right away, there is a little concern. He's a Brazilian, and first time making weight. We don't know if he's doing it the complete right way, if he's doing it the technical way. He is, though, on a 13-fight winning streak, 8 TKOs, and 7 decisions out of his 19 victories. So he strikes, he keeps it standing, he wants to get on top. He's had a couple rear naked chokes if you give it to him. He is from Brazil, he does have a submission game. Gauinot is a kickboxer, and he will much oblige to keep it standing. Gauinot, I believe, has the better head movement, the better foot movement, and the better technical striking. Lanker is a brawler and throws some wild punches. He's also coming from an organization where in jungle fights he primarily fought in a ring instead of a cage. I believe the transition along with the weight cut is all going to affect him. By decision, we're going to go unanimous decision 29-28. Luis Gauinot will win this fight and have his first UFC victory, feeling more comfortable back at flyweight. Next matchup is a welterweight brawl that we're talking about. John the Hitman Hathaway, 15-1, takes on Pascal Krauss, who's 10-0. Both of these men have had lengthy layoffs due to injuries. Pascal is more dangerous on the ground. He has 7 of his 10 victories from the submission. But Hathaway, I feel, is just slightly more well-rounded. We know a lot more about him. I think his striking is cleaner. He'll get takedowns to get points. He's smart enough to get out and stay out of the way of submissions, just getting takedowns to steal the end of rounds. I think John Hathaway wins this fight with a unanimous decision, but ring rust, cage rust, could play a huge part in either one of these men's performances. But we're going to take John Hathaway, more technical, a slight reach advantage. We've also seen him be able to brawl it out with Diego Sanchez, a war with Mike Pyle. We know of his solid grappling and his all-around work ethic. So we're going to take Hathaway with a unanimous decision in this fight. Next matchup we're talking about, John the Magician Dodson, who's 13-5, taking on Tim Elliott, 8-2-1, and Elliott's coming in on a late notice. Dodson, Ultimate Fighter alumni, another guy that was in the season of bantamweights and featherweights in the Ultimate Fighter, who is now returning to flyweight, beating bantamweights, now returning to flyweight. We saw his speed. How will he look 10 pounds lighter at his natural weight class? Tim Elliott, if you haven't seen the highlights, has a vicious knockout with the Muay Thai knee to Jens Pulver. He has power, he has explosiveness, but he has a sloppy technique. He can catch you, he can finish you, but he's not the cleanest with it. He isn't the fastest lightweight, and in there, John Dodson will be faster. He will come in and hit him, and we will see a first round TKO. That's the prediction. John Dobson will show us magic, and we'll get a first round TKO. He's going to be faster, more technical. A clean strike, a clean hook will land, and we'll spell goodnight for Tim Elliott. Next matchup we're talking about, another Ultimate Fighter winner. Tony El Kukui Ferguson, who's 14-2, is going to take on Michael the Menace Johnson, 10-6. Another Ultimate Fighter alumni who was a finalist but was on the losing end of his season. Ferguson, this is, I think, the third different opponent he's been scheduled to fight. Injuries and setbacks. Now just happy to see Johnson as his opponent. Both of these guys, wrestlers turning into strikers. Ferguson loves his boxing. Great uppercuts, great hooks, a great reach. Has shown impeccable takedown defense and stoppage capabilities. I think that the experience he's had within the octagon, his last war out with Eve Edwards beating a veteran, all of this is just infusing El Kukui with major confidence. He believes in his hands, he believes in his takedown defense, and if you can't take him down, you're not going to submit him. Michael Johnson, he has improving footwork, good solid hands, but I just don't see the power behind his hands when he connects the same way as Ferguson. In a stand-up war, I believe that Ferguson's going to land the cleaner shots. If he doesn't TKO Johnson, he will get a unanimous decision, stopping takedowns, keeping the range, and picking his opponent apart. Johnson can win this fight if he somehow is able to catch Ferguson, but I just don't see that happening. Ferguson has demonstrated a very good chin. Johnson will be on the losing end of this fight. Now we're up to the main card, and start that off, I believe, with the heavyweights. Pat H.D. Barry, 7-4, taking on Big LeVar Johnson, who's 16-5. Barry, I really do truly believe this, has the most power in his strikes next to Junior Dos Santos in the UFC heavyweight division. We've seen what he's done to Christian Moorcraft, broke Czech Congo, got lazy on his defense, and suffered for that. Now that he's cleaned up, he's started a path that I think will lead to a few knockouts at least, until he ends up with a superior grappling opponent. He is getting better, but he's swimming with sharks being in the UFC. Big LeVar Johnson has a reach advantage, a 7-inch reach advantage. But none to worry, that's the same reach disadvantage that Barry had to deal with against Moorcraft, and he's had to deal with larger. This fight's going to stay standing. If either man shoots for a takedown, it's going to be horribly disappointing. Someone's getting knocked out. It's happening in the first round, and I believe Pat Barry's going to be on the standing end of this, with Johnson on the bottom, winning with the TKO, but it could just as easily go the other way. Barry uses more kicks. I think he's going to start off punishing with the kicks, getting the legs, getting inside, trying to get his timing down, and as he hurts LeVar Johnson's lead leg, he'll then be able to get inside and land the TKO shot. LeVar Johnson comes from a Muay Thai background. He does have a background with kicks, but he just doesn't use them as much. Barry, though, has to keep his defense high and be worrisome about Johnson trying to work the body shots to break down Barry. But I really do think Barry's going to land the leg kicks, get inside, and then come overhand with a left right on the temple, end it with a few more shots on the ground, and we will see a first round TKO for Pat Barry. Very simply, it could end the other way in an exchange, and Johnson could drop Barry. This fight, I don't see making it out of the first round either way. But we're going for Pat Barry. Next matchup, very pivotal to the middleweight division. We've got Husamar Palhares, 14-3, taking on Allen the Talent Belcher, who's 16-5. Palhares is a tank. Physically imposing, 5'8", and at 185 pounds at the weigh-in, probably more like 205. During the fight, he is a tank. He grabs limbs and he breaks them. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is as highly regarded as Damian Maia's or Ronaldo Jacare Souza's. He comes out there to hurt people. 10 of his 11 stoppage victories are via the submission. His striking is improving. He is a scary, imposing, upcoming force in the middleweight division. And all those same labels could be said for Alan Belcher, who in 16 career victories, 15 of them from stoppage, 8 TKOs, and 7 submissions. Belcher is talented in all aspects of mixed martial arts, but his wrestling has been a weakness. Almost every fight he does end up at some point off of his back. Belcher is the better of the two strikers, devastating with his kicks, a Muay Thai practitioner, but if he tries to land those kicks, there's a very good chance that Palhares pulls a leg, pulls guard, and then takes the leg home with him. A heel hook, an ankle lock, something that could severely hurt Belcher. Belcher said that he's very aware of his opponent's capabilities, aware of this fight. Belcher wins if he catches Palhares, who does get sloppy inside of exchanges, will leave his chin up. Dan Miller did drop him. If that was an Alan Belcher hook, he would finish him. In the same, if we see the Palhares that came out in his last fight versus Massenzio, pulls guard and goes for a leg lock, it could be a very short night. In my opinion, also, if it goes to the decision, Belcher will most likely win this fight with an accumulation of strikes because he will be the better fighter in the cardio region, and by the third round, he will own that round. So unless Palhares is able to dominate the first and second, I believe that Belcher could steal a decision, but I really think in the second round that Alan Belcher is going to get caught throwing a kick, fall back into his tendencies, throw a kick, Palhares will grab it, pull guard, and will take a leg home with him. Leg lock submission in the second round for Rousimar Palhares will be our prediction. Now we're up to the co-main event of the night. Josh Kosceck, 19-5, taking on Johnny Big Rig Hendricks, who's 12-1. Josh Kosceck is a Division I wrestler, huge power in his right hand, but just hasn't looked the same since GSP used the jab and kind of exposed him to his lack of striking defense. He's such an excellent athlete, it's almost a little shocking to see the lack of diversity in the striking game because Josh Kosceck has fallen in love so much with his right hand. Johnny Hendricks has a massive left hand and has involved himself into learning all of the striking aspects. He uses kicks, he uses knees, he's more jujitsu with his strikes. I don't see these two headhunting. I see the wrestling nullifying each other, both strong backgrounds. And I think it's going to be the diversity in the strikes of Hendricks that wins this fight. I got Hendricks winning in a unanimous decision because Kosceck, he'll be looking for Kosceck to come out with that huge overhand. And I see Hendricks using more movement, picking his shots, and frustrating Kosceck, not letting it become a brawl. I'm going to take Johnny Hendricks to keep moving up the welterweight ranks with a unanimous decision. And now we're up to the main event of the night. A fight that, again, is quite literally just even. Nate Diaz, 15-7. Jim Miller, 21-3. This fight is all the way just between Nate Diaz and his striking. Does he keep the range? Does he keep the fight standing? Or does Jim Miller get in for the takedowns and put Nate Diaz on his back? The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu game, dead even. I don't see either one of these guys giving up a submission or even getting rocked enough to give up a submission. But what we have seen before is that Nate Diaz can be dominated by just a stronger grappler who's looking to strike, who's looking to land ground and pound. The other key aspect of this fight is that it's 5 rounds, not 3 rounds. 3-round fight, Jim Miller we know has good cardio. Nick Diaz has incredible cardio, and so does Nate Diaz. These guys can go for hours and hours. The longer this fight goes, the more the scales turn towards Nate Diaz. Jim Miller will get an accumulation of takedowns. The earlier he gets the takedowns, the better he's able to conserve his energy, the more he's able to make Nate carry him and exhaust himself out, the better off it's going to be for Jim Miller. I probably believe that we see round 1 for Diaz, 2, 3, and 4 for Miller, and 5 for Diaz, because his cardio will just outlast Miller's. But a split decision, which I think will be a close theme of the night with some great fights. Jim Miller, ground and pound, takedowns. He's the physically stronger of the two fighters, with neither one of them having the really big, dangerous knockout power. Their big, dangerous knockouts are triangles and chokes, but they're both great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, so it would be amazing or unexpected to say that either one of them would actually get caught. Split decision, though, our prediction, Jim Miller will be the next #1 contender in the lightweight division. This has been Caged Minds. Hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Uncage the Warrior Within Yourself. Check out Internet Sports News and Opinion Network on Twitter, isno_net.co.uk. Check them out. Yours truly even writes for them. Uncage the Warrior Within Yourself, and have a good night.